Yo, what's up? What's going on? What's good, everybody? That's right. It's the Bison Source right here. And on this date on October 18th, 2022, pretty much going to do a live, this is like an impromptu live of sorts. This is, coming off of the news that has been happening over the course of the past week plus, you know, and I wanted to try to just go through everything as quickly as possible in reference to the situation at 147 pounds. I mean, yeah, we have a fallout from the news of Terrence Crawford deciding not to fight Errol Spence Jr. for the undisputed welterweight championships. Yes, there is a thing out there in reference to Terrence Crawford facing David Evangian that's scheduled for December 10th at the CHI Health Center in Omaha, Nebraska. Okay. Yes, Terrence Crawford is oh my God, hell no. He is the former undisputed super lightweight champion. Yes, he is the current WBO welterweight champion. But we also have the WBC, WBA, and IBF welterweight champion Errol Spence Jr. Okay, and it's something that I've kind of like explained in a previous podcast is that after Errol Spence defeated Dennis Ugas to get that WBA welterweight championship, his choice, and it was his only route of where to go, is that he wanted to fight with Terrence Crawford. And that's how things work when you are managed by Al Heyman. You get options on fighters that you could potentially face, and you pick who you want to likely face for a specific amount, or they'll present to you how much money that could potentially generate. And you choose those opponents, and then you see if they could work out a deal with that opponent in order to secure that fight. That is what happens when you're managed by Al Heyman and you have a certain status where you can do that type of thing. So that is what happened with Errol Spence. Remember, Errol Spence was supposed to fight Manny Pacquiao for that WBA belt, but that didn't happen. Dennis Ugas beat Manny Pacquiao, so he fought Dennis Ugas because he wanted to be undisputed welterweight champion. So he went through that route, and so there was only one choice that he was going to have, and that was Terrence Crawford. So the job was for them to secure that deal with Terrence Crawford. Terrence Crawford apparently wasn't that cooperative in reference to making that fight happen. So we have what we have right now. In that, because there is no unification going on, there will be a number of organizations or sanctioning bodies that will call for mandatories to take place, right? Okay, so what we got is we have, as I said, Errol Spence Jr. as the WBC, WBA, and IBF welterweight champion, right? Okay, cool. Now, there are a lot of people that talk about, oh, he's supposed to face this guy. This guy is who he's supposed to fight. He's had this certain title for 18 amount of years, and so because of that, he should be facing this dude, because they are the supposed mandatory. Well, that isn't quite how things work when it comes to the title situation, right? Of course, people are talking about, well, maybe Errol Spence should go ahead and face Boots Ennis because Boots Ennis is the IBF mandatory because of what happened with him against Casille Clayton earlier this year. Well, yeah, Boots Ennis did, kind of like, beat Casille Clayton and was the number one guy. But there's a little situation with that. Shouts out to Fort Bend Media out here through Chicken Talk. I'm going to send you something here in just a moment, so bear with me on that. As I'll kind of send out this link here real quick to you to see if you're going to join in or if you're going to listen in. So hold on, I'll go ahead and copy and paste it join on there for you to join in the conversation if you're, willing to join in on the conversation. So, um, the thing about it is with Jaron Boots in this, I know that you had that IBF situation, right? Well, thing about it is that it's still going down as far as like, well, it's still a little bit of a mess with the IBF. Um, you had like a situation. This was like some time ago with the IBF welterweight division. They had the fight initially in 2020 when it came to the IBF final eliminator between Sergey Lipinets and Castillo Clayton. That happened back in October of 2020. And eventually, that fight went through the full 12 rounds for the interim welterweight championship, and well, ended up being a majority draw. Quick shout out to brother Joseph Heron of Warwick Radio Network. What's going on, my man? What's going on? I'm gonna see if I can also get you the link here real fast so that you could be able to join in, or well, I'll just go ahead and open things up here through the live chat. And there is the link right there for those that want to join in. But back to what I was talking about with the IBF. You had something in reference to them having a final eliminator in 2020 between Sergey Lipinets and Castillo Clayton. And like I said, it ended up being a majority draw. Let's see here if we got someone that wants to join in on the conversation. Brother Leonard Thomas is in the building. What's going on?
What's going on, man? I think you were on the live yesterday, right?
No, well, no, unless if it was like a discussion, but I don't think so.
Oh, okay. I apologize. I thought your logo looked very similar to a guy I thought that was on
Yeah,
yesterday to discussion of Errol Spence versus Keith Thurman.
yeah, no, no, I hadn't really talked about that as of yet. I'm gonna see if I could, get to that particular situation. Hopefully, I could get that queued up for that situation with Keith Thurman. But I've started with Jaron Boots Ennis, because he has been, kind of labeled as the IBF mandatory challenger due to, his win over Castillo Clayton earlier this year. But
Yeah.
that situation is kind of like the latest in the cycle when it comes to the world titles that Errol Spence Jr. has. So he's
Hmm.
kind of like the last one to acquire a mandatory challenger position, so to speak. So for those that are like really pushing for an Errol Spence Jr. boost in this fight, that's like he's he's technically the last in line in a way because
Oh, you know what? I didn't mean to cut you off. I know who you are now. Cause
yeah,
we've been on a panel before with on Joseph's
yeah,
hearings
yeah, yeah,
his thing. Yeah, I
right,
know who you are now. I recognize your voice.
yeah. So yeah, that thing with Castillo Clayton, that's pretty much like the last in a cycle of mandatory, that Errol Spence will have to honor. Plus, there's that whole other thing with Boots and Showtime that kind of hasn't been concrete as of yet. So that's kind of like the situation with the IBF, right? And in the WBC, you have Mr. Keith Thurman that is kind of like sitting there at the top of those rankings. And the way that kind of like worked out is that um, you had him fight Mario Barrios. Of course, that's his last fight against Mario Barrios, like, near the beginning of this year, just pretty much around February, right? And there was supposed to be another fight that was ordered in reference to an eliminator that was going to be between Virgil Ortiz Jr. and David Evangian. But that didn't necessarily take place. So that is kind of like how this whole thing with Keith Thurman kind of like situated itself or whatever it is. So I'm going to see if I could get one of these things to work. I talked with the WBC president, Mauricio Suleiman, in reference to this. And so I'm going to see if I could try to pull it up here as far as like what he was saying in reference to the WBC situation at welterweight. So I'm gonna see if I could. He was saying in reference to the WBC situation at welterweight. So I'm gonna see if I could.
So, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I wanted to say that I know that a lot of Errol Spence fanatics or fans, they don't want to see. There's an echo in the background.
Yeah. I took care of that.
Okay. They don't want to see Errol Spence versus Keith Thurman, but actually, as a Spence supporter, I actually want to see Keith Thurman and Errol Spence go at it. I think it's for legacy. I think that since the Crawford fight fell through, and that was the fight we all wanted to see. Since that fell through, I think the next best thing you can get is Keith Thurman. I think that if Earl was to face Keith Thurman, and that would be legacy. It would be a big pay per view. There's a history behind it. I would love the press conferences, and I just think Earl should take that fight. I think that because we can talk about this Crawford situation or whatever, but at the end of the day, yes, that's the fight I want to see more. But at the end of the day, let's not forget, if you study your boxing or was here long enough, Keith Thurman was Earl's original rival. I'm sure boxing source you were around for that, correct?
Yeah.
That was his guy. Now when Terrence Crawford came to the fray and when Keith Thurman was kind of inactive and he lost his belt to Pacquiao, it kind of changed. But the original guy for Earl was Keith. Until Terrence Crawford came. So I think that's since this fight fell through. I think that and I've been kind of shouting from the rooftops with this. I think that Earl should definitely fight Keith next. Now, understand it doesn't make sense why the WBC, because what has Keith really done, lately? He hasn't really done anything to deserve that spot. But as a boxing fan, as a fan who wants to see legacy fights, as a fan who wants to see a high level fight, since we're not getting the Crawford fight, I want to see that fight over any other fight right now, like Spence versus Stanionis or something like that. I just don't want to see that. I want to see Errol Spence versus Keith Thurman, and then assuming if Earl does win, that's just adds on to his legacy.
Now I'm gonna see if I could run that thing there in reference to what um, Mauricio Soleiman said for this thing here. So I'm gonna go through that clip, and it's gonna show here. Let me see if I could just get this thing here in the correct spot. And it's pretty much queued up to where I talked about the situation at welterweight. And this is a few months back when I talked with Mauricio Soleiman. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to run that clip, and then we'll see, and then I'll talk about more in reference to this particular situation. So I'm going to run this here real fast. Here we go. Want to jump down to welterweight. You do have the unified champion there in Errol Spence Jr. People are hoping that he does have an undisputed welterweight title fight in there. But in the interim, it seems like there may be one fight scheduled there that could be for the mandatory position in Virgil Ortiz and David Avanja, I think it is, that's going to be scheduled. Is that going to be kind of like set as the bout to determine the mandatory challenger for the WBC title?
We had ordered Ortiz against Avenesian and the winner to fight Thurman. It was a tournament which was ordered. We are determined to have the best mandatory challenger possible to avoid an undisputed champion or a unified champion having to fight questionable mandatory challengers.
Mm-hmm.
Mandatory challengers that have not the level, the stature to fight at a level of an undisputed champion. So it is a process. We were being happy with that. We're hoping to work with the WBO, with the IBF in achieving common mandatories. We did with the WBO. Roman was a common mandatory for WBC and WBO.
Right. Yes.
So it's a good. Our wish is to have unified champions, not to have the obligation to fight mandatory after mandatory after mandatory, because then we are doing a disservice to the sport. The key is to have very good mandatory contenders.
So there you go. He explained that situation where it was going to be a semifinal thing of sorts, where you would have had Keith Thurman versus Mario Barrios in one eliminator. You would have had Virgil Ortiz versus David Evangeline in another eliminator. And we only had that one particular fight with Thurman and Barrios. So as a result, you have Keith Thurman that is named as the WBC mandatory because of Virgil Ortiz opting to go another route in reference to having himself in position to be a mandatory challenger for another belt, which kind of like had him messed up either way, you know. So now it's pretty much expected that Keith Thurman is going to be like pretty much like labeled as the mandatory for the WBC title. And like Leonard saying, it's like, yeah, that's probably the best or the what I'd say is, of course, it's a more lucrative fight that's out there for Errol Spence Jr. You know, after the whole thing with Crawford fell apart, that's easily the most lucrative fight available for him. That's the one where, you know, he could, you know, get almost as much money, and it would be a very anticipated bout. It's someone that, you know, like Leonard said, that was like a rival, so to speak, when Errol Spence was coming up, when he was fighting to become a world title contender. You know, it was Keith Thurman that was, you know, at one point a unified champion, you know, defeating Danny Garcia to become, you know, WBC champion along with being the WBA champ. So he was kind of like viewed as the top guy in a sense in the welterweight division before you had you know, Terrence Crawford out there coming up trying to fight Manny Pacquiao at the time, but still, you know, got himself the WBO belt. So I think if it was possible, you know, Keith Thurman versus Errol Spence Jr. For those unified titles would be a very, very good bout there. But there is something else that's pretty much in the way of that. Brother Leonard, I'm not sure if you wanted to, you know, add in more in reference to the situation there with Keith Thurman. But I'll kind of like go into why Keith Thurman, if that fight happens, then it might be a little bit of a situation in the way there. So you wanted to continue on that?
Oh no, I just wanted to, piggyback off kind of what we were saying here to the fans can understand is that because Keith Thurman, this whole era of welterweights, you can really say that it would. Excuse me, hold on, give me 1 second.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I said this whole era of welterweights, it really started with Kell Brook and Keith Thurman. Would you agree or disagree?
Pretty much that was the
end of the Ford era and the
Pacquiao. Yeah, after Ford, yes.
Yeah, and this was this current crop, not this upcoming crop, but this current crop. It was Kell Brook, and then it was Keith Thurman. Keith Thurman was that number one dude, and he was unified. So he won multiple titles and he was unified.
Yeah.
And then Earl was still on his way up, coming up and fighting better competition after better competition. And so that was a fight that was supposed to really be Earl's Terrence Crawford, so to speak, if Terrence Crawford wasn't in the fray. It was anticipated. You had fans going back and forth, not to this extent, but still, back and forth.
Right.
And it was just a fight that I wanted to see as well. This is when I'm young, so this is when I really when I really started getting into boxing, like really heavily. And so I remember that. And now I'm kind of interested in what you have to say when you say, this thing that's in the roadblock, because according to Mauricio, he's saying that he's going to mandate it next. So if that's the case, what's the roadblock?
Okay, so this is usually the situation what happens with unified champions, and we had it for pretty much a good amount of time when you had Anthony Joshua as the unified champion when he first won the IBF, then won the WBA, and then eventually won the WBO. Is that you had to fight mandatory after mandatory after mandatory and go through the same cycle, with trying to see if you could get an undisputed fight at the time. But since that didn't happen, you had to fight mandatory after mandatory after mandatory, and eventually He went up against a mandatory challenger that ended up beating him. So that's kind of like how that worked in a heavyweight situation. And here, similarly, in a way, you have it in a welterweight situation where if you're not able to get an undisputed fight, you have to fight mandatory after mandatory after mandatory. So what ended up happening is with Errol Spence Jr., and he had his fight against Yordenis Ugas, but the reason that he was able to fight Yordenis Ugas for that particular WBA title was because the WBA granted an exception or exemption for that particular fight. In that cycle. So you had the WBA situation, you had them with all of their titles and everything and whatnot. Way back when you were supposed to have Errol Spence versus Manny Pacquiao for the unified titles, and Spence ended up being out of the picture. You had Yordenis Ugas step in there as the regular champ, and Manny Pacquiao as the super champ. And so when that fight happened, Yordenis Ugas won. He became the super champion. But the WBA didn't quite consolidate. What they did was they pretty much kind of like kept that whole thing with the regular belt or whatnot, right? And after that fight took place, you had Jamal James facing Razab Butayev for that WBA regular belt. And that was in August of last year. And so Butayev beat the crap. He beat the crap out of Jamal James in that fight. And scored a TKO win. And the WBA was going to order Yordenis Ugas to face Eimantas Stanionis at the time. That was going to happen, this year. But since they were able to work out for Errol Spence to fight Yordenis Ugas, what the WBA said was, okay, Stanionis, since we're having this fight, first off, we're going to give you some money for step aside, but also we're going to offer this to you. You could also face Razab Butayev. And if you win that fight, you're pretty much next in line for a world title shot against whoever wins, Spence and Ugas. And so he was like, all right, cool, deal. And he was able to beat Butayev in a very good fight. That was a very good fight that they had there in April at AT&T Center. So he gets that, that regular belt or whatever it is, WBA regular belt, and he's next in line. So he pretty much had his whole thing situated, and the IBF hadn't had anything straightened out yet. It didn't happen, or it didn't kind of like straighten out itself until the next month when Bruce Ennis defeated Cecile Clayton, right? So you had the situation with the WBC as a Doughboy, kind of like was coming up. I think he came in just after I played the clip there from Mauricio Suleiman. He does say, I don't see how in the world Thurman gets a title shot for Spence's WBC title. Well, the thing was with the WBC president, Mauricio Suleiman, he had this thing sorted out for the WBC at the beginning of the year. You had, it was an eliminator of sorts with Keith Thurman and Mario Barrios. Yes, that was one eliminator. Another eliminator was supposed to be Virgil Ortiz versus David Evanston. But we, of course, we found out that Virgil Ortiz ended up facing David Evanston. He went ahead and, he fought someone else in reference to another WB, well, at the time I thought it was going to be a WBO eliminator, but no, it was not. It ended up being some type of WBA eliminator, which, like I said, to this day, I don't know how that kind of like computes. But, Virgil Ortiz, still, had that thing there where he scored that win. And now you have this whole situation, like I said, where since we're not going to have the undisputed title fight, we're going to have a whole little situation. Now I know the Doughboy says that Jaron Ennis will face Eimantas Stanionis December 17th. Now, I could, hit up my guy from Philly, of course, YSM Sports Media, to see if he has any progress on that. I know that the last conversation that I had with him, he tried to get in contact with the IBF and the president of the IBF, Daryl Peoples, if I'm not mistaken, that is the president, in reference to that, IBF situation. Now, if you have Jaron Ennis versus Eimantas Stanionis next, one, that would mean that Stanionis would have to be paid again. And then two, he would probably have to be paid a good little price to be facing Jaron Boots Ennis, because there will be a huge number of people that would favor Jaron Boots Ennis to defeat Eimantas Stanionis if that takes place December 17th. And yes, I do know that there is a venue that has been reserved for December 17th, and that is the State Farm Arena in Atlanta, Georgia. So maybe you could have Boots Ennis versus Eimantas Stanionis. But if not, if you do have that, then you would have probably Errol Spence versus Keith Thurman, or Errol Spence would say, you know what, fuck y'all, I'm going to 154.
A quick question. So have you heard, since you are the boxing source, I know you're an insider, so I heard through the grapevine that a contract was sent to Keith Thurman from PBC. Have you heard anything of the sort? Do you know any progress or anything on that particular fight? Do you know any? Because I know last we heard of Spence and said I'm not going to fight Thurman, but again, that's before these whole things about this possible mandatory coming through. So have you heard anything?
If anything, that would be recent, very recent. Like I said, it's only 8 days after we hear of the news of Terrence Crawford saying that he's fighting David Abansian, right? So with that being said, you would have to say within the following 3 or 4 days, but that was the thing, is that they would have to have that type of offer sent out. First, it would have to be pretty much proposed to Errol Spence to say, okay, we like I said, we tried to work out this thing here with Terrence Crawford. Terrence Crawford has been really uncooperative at the end of the day. And yes, this has come from, to a certain extent, Mr. Steven Espinosa, president of Showtime Sports. And now recently, it comes out that Sean Porter has said has had remarks in reference to Terrence Crawford. So with that being said, we're not going to have an undisputed welterweight title fight. So now you have the whole thing where, okay, now we have this situation like we're talking about right now. You're, unified world champion, and these mandatory things are up. Now, if Thurman was offered a contract, and if Errol Spence said, you know what, man, fuck it, I'm going to fight Keith Thurman, you might have a little issue with the WBA, because, like I said, the WBA is first in line in reference to mandatory challenges. So if Errol Spence goes ahead and fights Keith Thurman, it would be for the WBC and IBF welterweight titles. The WBA title would end up being vacated. And if you do have what Doughboy is stating, Jaron Boots Ennis versus Eimantas Stanionis December 17th, then that would be at that particular time, it would be for the vacant WBA welterweight title.
I was going to. Okay, so again, I see what you're saying, and yes, I mean the WBA is going to mandate this at some point, but we understand that this news from Mauricio Sulaiman came within the last couple of days. So, if what he's saying, according to what he is saying, he's saying he said that, because if you saw the interview, he said that the WBC mandatory will be next. So if that's the case, going on based off what he said recently, then they wouldn't strip Errol Spence. They would just look past it again, and they would have Keith Thurman versus Errol Spence for the 3 belts.
Now I could see that.
I'm only saying that because now I could also, like I said, I could see you like you say they could very well strip him of some titles. That may happen, but all I'm saying is, we, according to Mauricio Sulaiman, what he could, because you saw the interview, correct?
I haven't seen the interview. I'm just
trying
to go by, what the timeline has been, basically.
Okay. So just to say this, Mauricio Sulaiman came out with an interview saying that he's going to Keith Thurman is going to be the mandatory for Errol Spence, and he's going to announce it at the WBC convention coming in early next month. Okay.
Yeah, they usually
So
convention.
yes, and then he said that they were saying, what about, basically asking the question, what about the other mandatories? They said no. He said, this is what he said, quote unquote, no, WBC mandatory is next. That's what he said. So if that's the case, and it's next, and he's already spoke with them, because he's already spoke with the other sanctioning bodies, and Errol Spence can't be stripped again, according to him.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of a, like I said, it's a crazy situation. I had went through the whole thing with what was stated by Mauricio Suleiman months ago, where they were trying to set up that tournament in the WBC. It's just that when that fight between Virgil Ortiz Jr. and David Evangeline fell through, and Virgil Ortiz Jr. ended up, facing who he ended up facing, that I didn't really get from, Mauricio Suleiman or the WBC, that Keith Thurman was the WBC mandatory challenger after that fight, kind of like took place with, or Virgil Ortiz Jr.'s, latest fight, So I'm like saying, hey, so what is going on with the situation with the WBC? If you're said that you were supposed to have a semifinal eliminator, and for me, if they didn't end up having that semifinal eliminator of sorts between Virgil Ortiz Jr. and David Evangeline, and you had in August Virgil Ortiz fight Michael McKinson, that was supposed to be for the WBO, kind of like the mandatory thing, then at that particular point, you would have thought that the WBC would have made it clear that, okay, Keith Thurman is the mandatory challenger. But up to this particular point, I had never really seen that until what Mauricio Suleiman stated. Now, if that is the case, you got two things. One, kind of like says how much pull the WBC has over every other organization. But hey, if they say that it's next and that the fight happens, I'm pretty much going to say that the WBA is going to push for that WBA title to be stripped from Errol Spence. So
yeah, and they very well. I mean, that may happen, but that's not according to what Mauricio said. But Mauricio said that, hey, he's already spoken to them, and the WBC is next. So if he's already spoken with them, and again, I don't know if you know where the interview was at. It's on Fight Hype. Interviewer asked him if he's spoken with them, then why would they strip him if he already spoke with them, according to him.
Now, that's a good question, but that's something that that kind of like contributes to the, like I said, it's a messy situation with the welterweight division.
And I just think in boxing, I just think that there is, like Sean Porter one time said, there's really no such thing as a mandatory, and depending on what particular, like, because if we're just going by, if you're just going by timeline, IBF really should be next. But I mean, in boxing, I'm not saying it's a dirty sport, but all I'm going to say is that I'm sure you know as well as I do that, sometimes mandatories won't get enforced, and it can be kind of a sticky or a fishy situation.
Well, it could become a fishy or sticky situation, but when it comes to IBF, the IBF kind of like dropped the ball in that sense, because they kind of like they didn't do something like how the WBO did at one point. Like I had mentioned, you had the instance where Castillo Clayton fought Sergey Lipinets, and that was supposed to be the IBF eliminator, and it ended up being a majority draw. But what they didn't do is they didn't say, hey, let's either quickly have an eliminator bout, or like say, okay, let's just name this guy as the mandatory challenger. So you're pretty much having from October of 2020 until May of this year, where they didn't have that situation, kind of like cleared up for the IBF. While on the flip side, you had let's go back to the WBO. You had in the WBO, right, with Gidigis Kavaliauskas versus Ray Robinson. That fight ended up being a draw, a very controversial draw, a fight that many people felt like Ray Robinson won that fight, but still ended up being a draw. But guess what happened? You still had Gidigis Kavaliauskas be kind of like named as the mandatory challenger to Terrence Crawford, and they ended up fighting in 2019. So, sometimes the just being straight up, the sanctioning bodies here kind of like mess themselves up when it comes to trying to establish a mandatory challenger in some of these divisions, and when you could have like a mess of sorts. So there's that. I think he had to step out real quick. I wanted to go into this live chat here. First with Doughboy, Coach Bozy Ennis said that David Evasion turned down Jaron Boots Ennis, but he is fighting Crawford. Spence can use the franchise belt to not fight Keith Thurman. Well, the thing about it is that they would have to name Errol Spence as a franchise champion. And it's kind of like interesting that they haven't named Errol Spence as the franchise champion, but they named Santos Saul Alvarez Barragan as a franchise champion. They have named Vasyl Lomachenko as a franchise champion, and then they made the franchise title be transferred when initially it wasn't supposed to be. But that's a whole nother story. But David Evasion did turn down Jaron Boots Ennis earlier this year. But yeah, he is now, fighting Terrence Crawford. Well, as one person that's, pretty much on the live chat now has stated on the Boxing Source Radio Show podcast, still has, doubtful thoughts that the fight between Mr. Terrence Crawford and David Evasion does take place, especially when the flyer of that particular fight can't even state CHI Health Center and spell health correctly. But that's a whole nother story. I wanted to bring in one frequent guest of the Boxing Source Radio Show, a person that, I have joined on their conversations, on their podcast, on YouTube, is the host of War a Week Radio Network, Mr. Joseph Heron, joining us. How are you doing there, Joseph?
Hey, James, how you doing on this beautiful Friday, evening? Tell you what, I'm just kind of toggling back and forth. I've got your volume up, but I'm actually watching the first game of the World Series.
Oh, man. Yeah, the World Series.
It's going on right now in Houston, Texas, brother.
Yeah, you got the Houston Astros, the American League champions versus the Philadelphia Phillies.
Philadelphia Phillies, that's right. A team that came in third in their division, only winning 87 games. Yep. And they're representing the National League. Oh boy. Yeah. This is where baseball. Yeah, they turned into boxing just for a second.
Well,
this should be one of the lowest rated. This should be one of the lowest rated World Series possibly in recent history.
Sometimes it's good to get hot at the right time, and the Philadelphia Phillies got hot at the right time. But the thing is, usually in baseball, since it's a multi-game series, you should have it where the better team eventually wins the series. But in this particular case in the National League, that just didn't happen. You had
you know what, man? I could go on and on about this, and it really makes me sick. I can't stand the wild card. I used to love it back when there were only two divisions, and it really meant something when you're one division, and then went into that final NLCS or ALCS for all the marbles, right? What's the point of even have a 162 game season then?
Yeah.
Dude, seriously, like April baseball doesn't even matter anymore.
Yeah.
Well, it's always the team that gets hot. But
shoot, look at the past couple of years, right? When you say April baseball didn't matter anymore, right? So you have last year's champion, the Atlanta Braves, right? They weren't doing good at the beginning of the season. They had, a whole bunch of injuries, this and that. And then they were able to turn it around and get themselves on a run and eventually became the hottest team and ended up winning the World Series.
That's my point, brother. It's always the team that's already playing elimination baseball heading into the playoffs. And that's the team that usually does the best. And it really pisses me off. But anyway, man, let's get back to boxing, brother. And this is where you're going to see the real weakness of the sanctioning organizations. Mm-hmm. Because when you have one of the top earners that's a unified champion in the division, right? And the top, the two top earners in the division, you see at 147, they're the belt holders right now.
Yep.
This is where you see how weak they truly can be. Because they realize these guys outside of a fight against each other really don't give a shit about the titles or their mandatories. And what are the sanction organizations going to do? Going to strip them? Do you really think they give a shit at this juncture of their career? They're going to make money with or without a belt around their waist at this point of their careers. And so what do you think the sanction organizations are going to do? Well, hell, we don't want to strip this guy, Errol Spence or Terrence Crawford, of their titles when that's the most money we're going to be able to make.
Yep.
And put together a fight like, let's say, Virgil Ortiz versus Jaron Ennis or Stanionis versus Ennis.
Yes,
and make a fraction of what we could make if the belt were around Errol Spence or Terrence Crawford's waist.
Yep.
And this is what you're going to see. How have they been in forcing Canelo Alvarez to fight as mandatory challengers? They're not going to do it. They don't do it. Look, the only one who's been consistent in doing that in the past has been Daryl Peoples of the IBF.
Right.
And he really hasn't been doing that lately.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the real problem when you're talking about the gridlock, the belt gridlock here. It's being monopolized by two guys, and everyone is waiting to see if, well, we don't want them to rush off and move up to 154 because that's where all the money is. We want to have money and big fight opportunities attached to these titles.
Word.
Because the money gets, very marginal after that. And it really, really sucks. Yeah, and I know Doughboy says right now, Errol Spence versus Jaron Ennis will be a better matchup than Crawford. Maybe, maybe not, but it's a fraction of the money.
That's right.
And that's the bottom line. And if you squeeze these guys too hard, if WBC, IBF, or WBA squeeze Errol Spence too hard, he has no problem giving up the damn belt.
Word.
He doesn't care. Because even if both men dropped all four of their titles, and they fought later on, would we give a shit? No, we would still recognize those two guys are the best fighting the best. Right? And this is the problem. It's like when you get to this level, the belts really don't matter.
Yep.
I mean, think about this, James. Do you need the belts to tell you who the two best fighters in any division are?
Nope.
No, not at all. And so this is showing and showcasing the true weakness of these sanctioning organizations, how weak they truly are. And also when you're talking about a division like the middleweight division, right, in which all of their champions are scattered on different networks, right?
Oh, man.
Everyone in that division, they're scattered over different networks. How successful have they been in mandating and enforcing their mandatory challengers?
Oh, I could go into that here in a little bit.
See, that's what I'm saying. That's a big. That's the biggest problem. They can't even enforce their mandatories because these fights are impossible to make if they're on a rival network.
Yeah, that's true.
That's in my opinion, aside from piracy, that's the biggest dilemma that the business faces. And you're seeing that unfold before our very eyes with the evaporation of Ryan Garcia and Gervonta Tank Davis. This is a fight that everyone wants to see, including both fighters. And guess what? And I told you this last time I talked to you. They still haven't gotten the network situation figured out. And until they do that, yeah, we don't have a fight, and we're not going to.
God damn. All right. Real quick, I wanted to add in another one to join in conversation. Dirk Bates joining in. What up, Dirk?
Hey, what's up, fellas?
How you doing, brother?
I'm doing well, just listening in.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny, man. It's like on my podcast last night.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like I was breaking down everything in this manner, and everyone calls me the wet blanket. I'm like, look, guys, it's the business of boxing. Is the rules of it are absolute. It's like money trumps everything.
Yep.
And when you have these exclusive deals with these promoters and these networks, it makes it virtually impossible to put together rival matchups, right?
Exactly. And I mean, I'll give a quick example. Earlier this year, what was it? Steven Espinoza had been on this thing here for Showtime when they were putting out a schedule. And he had a fight that was coming up at the time it was scheduled for Juneteenth weekend. He stated it was WBC middleweight champion Jamal Charlo against Masi Selecki, but he made the statement that it was supposed to be Jamal Charlo versus Jaime Munguia, but they couldn't get a deal done in time. Why? Because Jaime Munguia was tied to Golden Boy, who is tied to the Zone, and they didn't want to relinquish Jaime Munguia for him to have a one-off fight with Jamal Charlo. And that is why we have a lot of these situations where, like Joseph said, these mandatories aren't being enforced or called because they don't want to have these deals done between these networks. Real quick, had Doughboy on here, made a comment. The pound for pound rankings is a joke as well. How in the world is Vasily Lomachenko ranked with 2 losses and no undisputed under his belt? Well, I'm here to tell you, Doughboy, that is because you are looking at the pound for pound rankings of ESPN. That is not what we do here on the Boxing Source. The Boxing Source has their own pound for pound rankings, and you can check it out at theboxingsource.net. That's right. You can visit the site, theboxingsource.net, and you can hit on that link, pound for pound rankings, and you can see the list of who the Boxing Source has as the top 10 pound for pound fighters in the sport. Just had to put that out there.
You know what? And what makes me sick, James, and I saw, based on the tweet that Ryan Garcia put out late last night, right? Okay. Stephen A. Smith, that ass clown, right, was on ESPN. He was on ESPN today, bad-mouthing the sport of boxing, but just talking nonsense like he has a clue. And praising and heralding UFC for putting above having the best fight the best. I'm like, you idiot. I'm like, UFC. Okay, that's just like saying, look at Top Rank. They've got Devin Haney. They're getting Vasily Lomachenko this weekend. And guess what fight they're going to put on next? The best fighting the best. Vasily Lomachenko taking on Devin Haney later next year. Okay? That it's like comparing Top Rank to UFC. That's all it is. This idiot, he's so stupid. He doesn't even say, hey, you know what? At least they're trying to put fights together with other networks and other platforms. Okay, UFC, MMA, they don't even bother trying to do that. Right. When have you ever seen UFC put together a fight with a rival promoter?
Nothing with Bellator.
Nope. and this idiot, he's so stupid, he doesn't even realize it. And so he has the nerve to talk about boxing. Oh, is these promoters? They're terrible. The promoters are, shut the hell up, dude. He's such an idiot, dude. And it makes me cringe. And the worst part about it is that these mainstream fans who don't know any better are buying. They're eating this shit up. Yeah, boxing sucks, man. Yeah. And you know what? The diehard fans of boxing don't help either. Look at them crapping all over Jaime Munguia, okay, for taking on Gonzalo Gaston Correa, who, yes, he's the number 69 ranked fighter in the middleweight division, right? And was knocked out in the second round by Janibek Ali Manala. But look, how easy is it to make a Jaime Munguia fight when there's virtually no one in that middleweight division who fights on DAZN?
Yep.
So from what I think is going to happen and from what I'm hearing is that Golden Boy is trying to work out a deal with Gennady Golovkin to try and put that fight together. Jaime Munguia versus Gennady Golovkin in 2023.
I'm sorry.
Because, I mean, they have no choice. It's like...
But Joseph,
yeah, go
this
ahead.
this guy has 40 fights and has basically never even had a step-up fight, really. And
I'll tell you why, brother. I'll tell you why. And once again, it's just business 101, man. This is a guy who's 26. He didn't have a deep amateur background like Janibek Ali Manala. Okay, This is a guy who basically he doesn't have a deep amateur pedigree, not even like Ryan Garcia. Okay, so this is a guy who is still learning on the job, a lot like Gilberto Zurdo Ramirez, right? So where he's at 44-0, and he's just getting his first big fight opportunity. Okay, and it's that they're taking their time with this kid. This is a guy who's still learning on the job, and obviously he hasn't improved as much as they would have liked to have seen him improve under the tutelage of Eric Morales. Okay, he still doesn't work behind an intelligent jab. He still doesn't use feints. He's still not as responsible defensively as they need him to be.
Right.
If he's going to be fighting the Goliaths at 160. So
Isn't
this
it too
is
late for
why.
that?
No, the dude, he's only 26.
Yeah, but 26, that should be your prime years, like your best years.
He's only 26, and two, like I said, he didn't have a deep amateur background. He's still learning on the job. I know he's a former title holder at 154 pounds, but it's a completely different situation than, say, Janibek Ali Manala, who's got 300 amateur fights, right?
Well,
and he's fought much better competition at the world-class level, right?
Well, when
That's
have you ever seen a
completely different situation?
Now,
when have you ever seen a guy who's still developing, like in the mid of his career, beat like an elite guy who's been boxing his whole life?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Like when?
No, I'm saying, when does that ever happen?
I'm sorry. Maybe I don't understand your question.
So you're saying that Munguia basically didn't have a deep amateur background like some of these other guys?
It was almost non-existent. He turned pro at a very young age, like at 15.
Yeah. So I'm saying, like, for example, a Shakur Stevenson who's been boxing his whole life since he was like a child.
Yep.
And is like basically a prodigy.
Yep.
Guys like Munguia would have no chance against those type of guys. Those guys who've been boxing all their life, deep amateur.
Well,
deep amateur background.
Yeah, well, it depends. Once again, styles make fights. Jaime Munguia, a lot of amateurs, like, especially when the way it used to be scored, right? Guys like Shakur. In the amateurs, the aggressive mauling style really isn't effective in the amateurs.
Right.
And so you don't see that style very often. So if you're going to see someone be effective against a guy like Shakur, a guy who's brilliant at controlling distance, and you have no chance of outboxing him from mid to long range, that would be a style that would probably be most effective. So it all depends on the style matchup, not just the level, right? But yeah, Jaime Munguia, the reason why, and once again, it's boxing promotion 101. This is the business of boxing. You protect your ticket sellers. And that's one of the few ticket sellers right now that Golden Boy Promotions actually has. Trust me on this, right? Trust me on this. You're going to see Jaime Munguia fight the number 69 ranked middleweight and still sell more tickets than the lineal undisputed lightweight champion of the world right now. And that's the reality. That's why they're taking their time with this kid. And they're not going to push him along until they see those improvements. Because once again, Roberto Diaz and Eric Gomez are two of the best matchmakers in boxing. and they're very good at moving their fighters at the right time.
Okay.
So that's why you're seeing this, brother.
Okay, so you kind of like said something that was a very key factor there when it comes to Jaime Munguia, is that they are trying to protect him as a ticket seller and try to see that, okay, one, if we could get the money and he's, very good and as a ticket seller, then let's, just continue to build him and continue to build him until we pretty much see that either, hey, okay, he's ready to face someone like a Nemhanuli or, any of the other middleweight champions, or if it's a situation where it's like, okay, we could only do so much. He's bringing us money, but this is all we can basically do. Let's just see what happens with him against one of these guys and just, throw our ticket in the lottery to see if he's going to win,
Feed him an old guy like Triple G. That's what they're calling.
Yeah, like a Triple G or something.
Well,
like that.
and at this point of his career, that's a winnable fight, and it's a much bigger money fight than Ali Manala, brother.
Oh yeah, definitely. That,
so it's like I feel bad for Janabek in Top Rank. They're going to have a really hard time matching him up against anybody.
Well, yeah.
I mean, you're already seeing his mandatory challengers elect not to face him. You're already seeing that. I mean, how many mandatories as listen to this, James. How many mandatories? How many times has Jaime Munguia already been in the mandatory position and Golden Boy's elected to pull him out for that reason?
A million.
Yeah, well, that's why. Now you know why, because he's a ticket seller. Time is still on his side, right? He's still learning on the job. They're in no hurry, dude. They're in no hurry. You might not see him if they can't secure this deal with Gennady Golovkin. You might not see him in a big, meaningful fight for the next 2-3 years. And it really won't matter because all the while they're keeping him active and he's selling tickets.
Yeah.
There were no negotiations with Charlo.
Hold on. Real quick. We've had the instance with
No, it never started. They weren't interested.
He moved up from 154. Yes, he did beat a former 147-pound guy to win the 154-pound title, but that's, neither here nor there. Goes from 154 to 160. He's pretty much slated as number one contender for the WBO title, but he never enforces that mandatory.
Yep.
He goes earlier this year when you had the whole situation with Nemhanuli and Demetrius Andrade. That didn't, go forward. Demetrius Andrade planned to move up to 168. So the WBO said, hey, okay, let's see if we could try to have Nemhanuli versus Jaime Munguia. But that still didn't go.
Yeah, and so look at when Golden Boy loved that fight with Jermall Charlo. They said, you know what? I think our guy can beat him. We saw how much Charlo had against another pressure fighter, hard-punching guy like Macias. You know what? I think it's time. Let's roll the dice. And this is when Golden Boy hadn't signed that multi-date lucrative deal with DAZN, right? To get those TV dates back. And as soon as, in my mind, it almost seems like Golden Boy used that negotiation as leverage just to negotiate that multi-date deal. And as soon as they, signed the contract with DAZN, excuse me, guys. What do you think happened? They pulled out of it. They said, look, if DAZN isn't involved, we can't do it. And they're like, wait a minute. It's already done. The negotiation is already done. All we need are the signatures on the contracts. And what happens?
Yeah.
So once again, guys, if you've got to look at the big picture rather than just lambasting these hardworking fighters and these promoters. I mean,
that's why.
Look, when you sign these exclusive deals with these networks, in my opinion, aside from piracy, that's the biggest problem within the business of boxing at this time. It's almost like every network has turned into farm systems, and if both superstar fighters aren't fighting under the same promotional banner or network, good luck staging it.
Good luck. Joseph, one quick question. So my favorite current fighter right now is Jaron Ennis.
Oh, he's a badass for good reason, brother.
Yeah. I think he has the potential to be like the face of boxing just because of his fighting style. Like, he's very exciting. And it seems, I don't know how he's going to be like later, but it seems like he wants to fight the best. So,
Of course he does. And
yeah.
he's a good, and he's a good kid, and he's
Yeah.
very disciplined. He listens to his dad, and he doesn't have a problem getting out of shape between fights. He's always in the gym, doesn't have a huge posse. He's not an arrogant prick. He's a good kid, and he's a great fighter. And he's going to be a problem for everyone. Here's the problem, though. His only ace in the hole is that Steven Espinosa and Showtime love him. But unfortunately, he's signed with Cameron Duncan.
Yeah.
Okay. How successful is it going to be to negotiate any of these deals outside of Showtime with Cameron Duncan? I mean, he's got no juice in the business as a promoter. So you know what? It's going to be a while, brother. But he would be wise, you know, and once again, he would be wise, right, to look at the landscape of 47 and 54. And most of those fighters are with Showtime and Al Heyman advisement. As soon as his contract is up with Cameron Duncan, he needs to jump ship and sign an advisory deal with Al Heyman so he can start getting these realistic fights at 47 and 54. Now, keep in mind, Jaron Boots Ennis, boy, he's a big kid. He's like a biscuit shy of 54. He's not going to be able to compete at 47 much longer.
More like a short piece of bread, buddy.
That's what I'm saying, brother.
Well, if Al Heyman is smart, when I look at Jaron Ennis, I'm trying to put myself in Al Heyman's shoes. I see money signs because Earl's not getting any younger. Who else at PBC in your welterweight division do you see becoming a star other than Ennis? I mean, even though he's not with the PBC,
what they should do, and I think Cameron Duncan, we should speak with Steven Espinosa. Whoever he fights, whomever Jaron Boots Ennis fights, put him in the headlining slot and stage him in Philadelphia, damn it. Come on. Turn him into a ticket seller in one of the greatest fight cities in America. Look at Philadelphia's long, rich fighting history. Yes, you can. You turn him into a ticket seller in Philly. Hell no. You stage him in Philly. You start turning him into a ticket seller. And then as soon as he starts making dollars, like as soon as he starts selling tickets, it'll be impossible to avoid him.
Yeah.
But that's the way you do it. That's promotions 101, dude.
Yep. Well, I have someone here that is the man when it comes to Philly boxing. All right. He's the guy that leads YSM Sports Media. Brother Jamil is in.
Brother Jamil, how you doing, my friend?
What's good, yo?
I tell you what, Jamil, it's good to talk to you, brother. I love your content, man. You always do a great job representing the sport, and always do a great job talking sense whenever you come on and talk, brother.
Likewise, Joe. Likewise.
Thank you, my friend.
Yeah, so we were just talking about the thing there with Jaron Boots Ennis as far as like his situation, with Showtime or with Cameron Duncan, and was trying to actually someone else kind of like asked me about it earlier today too. So like I said, I was like, as of right now, I'm not sure about what Jaron Ennis' situation is with Showtime or like I said with Al Heyman. So I had asked you, like, if you know how long Jaron Ennis is under contract with Cameron Duncan. You know that information.
I actually don't know the exact length of the contract, but I think he probably got maybe like a year or two left. Okay. Something like that.
Let me ask you something, Jamil. Why hasn't Cameron Duncan? I mean, you know what? I understand that these guys want big money and they want to fight on a network, but come on, man. Cameron Duncan needs to put on a regional show in Philadelphia, get the local sponsors, get the local networks involved, turn this kid into a ticket seller so these bastards can't avoid him any longer.
I agree 1,000%. It's long overdue. He should be headlining cards in Philadelphia.
Yep.
Even if it's okay, so it's Edgar Berlanga's headlining cards at the Hulu Theater. Hulu Theater holds about 5,000. We have a couple of venues that hold. All right, so we got the Lear Court Center that holds 10, Wells Fargo that holds 20. That might be a bit too much for him right now, unless you do a card with him and Fulton on it. then
Yeah.
I think that could do the 10,000.
Yeah.
But there's a bunch of college arenas, and there's a venue called the Met that holds about 3. Let them start off with that. Give them.
That's right. There's nothing wrong with selling out to 4,000 or 5,000 seat venue. I mean,
Yes.
for crying out loud, Deontay only fought in front of 8,000 earlier this month. Okay, they completely shut off the upper deck. He
Yep.
fought in front
Barclays
of
on
8,000 at the Barclays, man.
Wow. Damn.
Yeah,
Yep.
I mean, it was
Yeah.
they sold out the 8,000. Either they gave away they comped the last remaining tickets, but it was a sellout in that lower area. But yeah, that was Deontay Wilder. Look, there's nothing wrong with, like, I do commentary and ring announcing for club shows here in San Antonio. And that's how Bam Rodriguez got his start and started building a following. Was we featured him before he was signed with Golden Boy, before he was signed with, or I'm sorry, Top Rank or Matchroom. Yeah, he was selling out. He turned into a big ticket seller here. And that's why they were interested in signing him. Okay, he was consistently selling out 4,000 and 5,000 seat venues here.
I don't see how he couldn't get a guy like Butayev or Cody Crowley. That should be easy to make, should it?
Well, you know what? It doesn't matter. Just keep him active. And once again, people forget their boxing history. And Jamil knows this. You know what? Just stick him in with the number 100th ranked welterweight. Just keep him busy. Keep him active. Okay, and when a fighter is that active, okay, working club shows, he doesn't always have to be on TV. Just promote your ass off, work at the live gate, become a big ticket seller, and guess what? You don't have to spar that often if you're really active, like the old school badasses back in the day.
I've never talked to Cameron, right? But this would be on the outside looking in on Cameron. You got some promoters that have found a little niche where they act as managers, so to speak.
They're glorified managers, Jamil. You know this, brother.
And I'm trying to be very PR when I say this.
Right.
Of course. That's why I'm here, my friend.
Okay. So he's found a little niche where they don't have to pay to move the opponent. They get the network to do it. And the network only has so many slots. So if it's a situation where, he's throwing the show, then he has to put up the money.
Yep.
So
then you know what? Then do what we do here in San Antonio. You hustle, you get sponsorship to cover the cost of the promoters and the accommodations. You hustle and you get sponsorship. There's so many businesses locally that would want to attach themselves to a role model and a good kid like Jaron Boots Ennis.
Yeah.
That kid's going to be a star, man.
I can say this for certain. This is not conjecture. This is not opinion. For certain, Heyman has been actively pursuing Jaron Ennis since the amateurs.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm sure, man. I'm sure. And look,
if I had to guess, knowing the parties involved, there's always a number, and the number keeps getting higher with success.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And I'm saying that with a little smile on my face.
That's right. But look. The name of this game is selling tickets. And it starts at the regional level, and it starts in his hometown. Look, Jaron could be the next big franchise out of Philadelphia. Just behind the 76ers, just behind the Flyers, just behind the Phillies. I mean, come on, man. Just ask Russell Peltz, dude.
If I have any criticism for Al, it's 2 things. First, activity. I would like to see his fighters active more. I'm not going to be like one of these dudes on Twitter that's just, PBC is broke. And then, nah. I would just like to see his fighters more active. Maybe if he can find a lower level outlet for them to fight on. And second, not throwing enough show. Like, he can't, like, promoters today kind of get a little lackadaisical, where they just
they're lazy.
And
look, I'll say it. I'll say it for you, Jamil. Okay. They're lazy, brother. Unless they get a sure licensing fee from a network and a sure site fee from a casino, They don't want any part of it.
They really don't want
And
to
so
do it.
that's where operations like the guys that I work with, that's where we step in. Do you realize how many signed fighters from other promotional banners we actually stage shows for?
I can imagine.
Dude, that's the only way these guys stay busy is on club shows and regional
that kind
shows.
of operation is essential in this sport because not
It's the
everybody
lifeblood of
can fight on
boxing in
TV.
America.
But,
Yep.
they don't throw shows in, like, people love boxing everywhere. But the problem is, I don't always want to have to drive 2 hours to New York to get boxing. It's either Vegas,
That's it.
boxing.
Yeah.
It's either Vegas,
New York,
New York,
LA.
California,
Yep.
and they'll
Texas.
sprinkle into Texas. That's
Yep.
it.
That's
Like,
it. That's
I
it.
want cars
That's
here
a
in Philly.
problem, brother. That's a problem.
Scooter,
So-
Jaron, and Tifo Burlington. Why not?
Yep. Exactly.
Christian
Look at that.
Cardo.
Look
Why
at that
not?
whole gym, brother.
What are we
That
doing?
entire gym. Put together a card with that entire gym. Get some sponsorship, okay, and put together a damn show. That's a guaranteed 5,000 seater, right there.
Reese Arlene versus Fulton, maybe as the main event.
Okay, now you're talking. See,
Yeah.
there's that guy's in bed with Steven Espinosa and Showtime. They love him.
Yeah.
Okay, unless Showtime's going to be involved, Stephen Fulton's not going to be fighting. But Jaron Boots Ennis in the interim, rather than just waiting in the gym. Okay, dude. Oh no, I scared off Jamil. Damn it. He probably had to
Well,
take a call or something.
He says on his Twitter that he has a fight date in December. Jaron Ennis.
Well, I mean, we did something for December 17th, possibly, but we don't know for sure yet, or at least I don't know for sure yet.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, December. So I mean, that might be that Spence Stanionis fight. He might be the undercard for that.
Oh, there he is. There you are, Jamil. I was afraid I scared you off because of my big mouth.
Oh no, I don't think they're going to put Spence in Atlanta.
Yeah, that's the thing.
No.
Oh, so
That's
is
December
it, so
17th.
are they trying to?
Atlanta date.
No.
So Jamil, are they trying to put Boots on that undercard, or are they trying to like have him a main event?
I think he's going to be the co-main event. If he fights on December 17th, I think he'll be the co-main event. That's
Okay.
if. But, the welterweight division, honestly, is in a state of flux because nobody knows what the IBF is going to do. So whatever the IBF decides to do, that's going to change the landscape because that could go from Boots possibly fighting Errol Spence, which I doubt, to Boots fighting for the vacant IBF.
Yep.
And
or at least the interim.
That's why I wanted to get at you, Jamil, in reference to that IBF situation because, I know that you were trying to get in contact with the president there for the IBF, and couldn't get really any feedback on that. So it's like, now we had the whole thing with that IBF situation, and I talked about the WBA in reference to Stanionis, getting an exception to fight Butayev in April because they kind of like try to promise him that he would be next in line. So it's like, how is this whole situation going with all of that? And I'm not sure because with the IBF, if they're trying to find somebody for Boots to fight, you really have to go down the line big time in order to see if someone is going to be available for him. Like, are you going to have Boots in this fighting somebody named Karen? I don't think so.
Yeah. But one thing we know about dudes like that, they'll take a fight and they'll come to fight.
He'll definitely take a fight.
I do like the fact, even though as a fan, I'm not familiar with the guy, so I don't know how the quality is. As a fan, I want to see dudes like that get shots, but I also want to quiet the naysayers that says Jaron Ennis isn't what his fans say he is. Because you got some dudes that are pushing the Rashidi Ellis. Why Boots didn't come call out Rashidi Ellis?
Madness.
Why is it that whenever a guy wants to fight a champion, right, and he puts himself in a position to fight a champion, and he's a dangerous opponent, the fans of these champions will try to deflect and have him fight somebody that's behind them. Like, oh no, we gotta see
Oh
what this
man.
is. We gotta see what this is. Like, what the fuck
Hold
is
up.
Exactly.
You want to
Canelo fans be doing that.
Carson Campbell got his shot, right?
Yeah.
Oh, it's different. And no disrespect to Ocampo, but it's different when that rabbit got a gun, right? And you know
Right.
it's a fight that your guy may not be favored to win.
You know what's my fear? I fear that Spence and Crawford are going to retire without giving Boots a shot. And if he doesn't have one of those big names on his record, I hope not. I hope not, because all these guys in the past who became superstars, they had to get a big superstar on their resume to become a star. It's going to be hard for Boots to do that, fighting guys like Stanionis and Butayev. He needs a big name on his resume,
And
even if they're older.
I mean, but think about this, right? With Boots Ennis, what he's done pretty much up to this point is not much different than what Errol Spence Jr. did up to the point that he became the mandatory challenger for the IBF welterweight championship, who at the time was Kell Brook. So he's doing all of this. He put himself into that position. The IBF is supposed to be the most stringent when it comes to mandatory defenses or mandatory challenges. So Boots pretty much did what he needed to do, particularly in this sense of, well, I did say this a while back, reference to IBF when you had Castillo Clayton versus Sergey Lipinets, and it ended up being a draw. Okay. Well, Boots Ennis beat Lipinets and he beat Castillo Clayton. So you really can't have any type of, debate or anything in reference to where he is or what his status is in the IBF rankings. He beat, he beat everybody that was there at the top of the rankings for the IBF. So there really isn't anything else out there for Jaron Boots Ennis outside of a world title shot. You're not going to have him fighting Virgil Ortiz Jr. because, as Joseph said, when you have those situations with these networks, they're not going to be making those fights of that caliber, especially if it's not going to make the money that they're looking for in that situation. So that's not going to happen.
Tell Daryl people stop ducking me, man.
Huh? Who?
Tell
Virgil
Daryl
and them ain't gonna fight that boy.
Tell Daryl people stop ducking me, yo.
Yeah. Daryl Peoples had to stop ducking you, son.
You know what I'm calling about? Like, come on.
Hey, real quick about Joe. Joe is kind of like, off on the call real quick. You do have to do this. I'm going to tell the Nevada State Athletic Commission, not the Nevada State Athletic Commission. No, I'm going to take that back. I'm going to tell the New York State Athletic Commission to stop ducking me, son. Okay? The Muhammad Ali Act states that you are supposed to provide me with the information that I request. Stop ducking me, son. All right? If I say that I want information on these fights, you're supposed to provide me with that information for those fights. Stop ducking me, son. Don't tell me about we ain't supposed to be providing that information. Bullshit. Okay? And yeah, I did say that. Bullshit. Y'all better come up off that information. All right? Stop ducking me, son. All right. So yeah, so what is it?
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
Hey, man, I'm still waiting for your Hogan impression, brother.
Well, you know something, Hulkamaniacs. I've been hustling and fighting, and I've called out the New York State Athletic Commission, man. And what did they tell me? They told me that they can provide information. What you gonna do, brother? When
dude, that is almost perfect, man.
All right. Hey, we got Lefty in the building joining us here real quick. Well, he was on. I guess he had to jump off real fast. But yeah, man. Like I said, this welterweight situation is just a whole mess. And with that whole thing with Terrence Crawford doing what he's doing, like now you have to have fights taking place now, because everything that was kind of like situated, like I said, you had stuff planned out. You could have had, Spence Crawford on November 19th. You could have had who do we say? Cool Boy Steph, he was planned to be part of the undercard, and you could have had all these other fights ready, and well, that kind of like was all shut down. So now it's like, okay, now we gotta figure out, okay, what we're gonna do, what dates we have, what fighters we're gonna put on these dates, what fights can we make. And so now it kind of like, well, particularly with Steven Espinoza, is that now he's in a situation where he has to scramble to say, okay, I done dedicated my time and my effort to try to make this fight because I know it was going to be the biggest fight in boxing. But since this guy didn't want to cooperate, now I had to scramble and fix and, do this and do that in order to see about, putting on fight cards on Showtime, making sure that the budget's right for it, see if everybody's down for it, and try to make that happen. And, now it's going to take, for me, at least about 3 or 4 months for that whole thing to sort itself out, And yeah, I know that Errol Spence is a top dog, but as someone that asked earlier, in reference to Errol Spence and maybe potentially Keith Thurman being offered a contract, like I said, I'm not sure about that because if that would have happened, it would have been within the past 3 days or so, given the news of what happened with Terrence Crawford. So if Keith Thurman was, sending off a contract or sending an offer, I mean, maybe it could build up to something, but outside of that, I really don't know. I really don't know at this point. And it's just making this whole situation be not a good look in a sense when it comes to boxing, but that's kind of like how it is. That's the business, brother.
Hey, James. Yeah, look, dude, and unfortunately in the boxing business as well as the music business, the second word of that term is always most important. And it's imperative that fans actually start realizing that and start learning more about the business so they don't just start, just torching their beloved pastime like Stephen A. Smith just did, uninformed, right, on ESPN, because that's how it looks.
Joseph,
right?
Did you hear him? Him and Molly have no idea.
It made me sick. Honestly, dude, I wanted to throw a brick through my TV.
Oh, so wait. So, well, I was going to say, and it was worse.
It made me sick. I before you came on, Jamil, I went on a kind of a rant.
Yeah.
Just exposing how idiotic and ignorant he sounded. Heralding, kissing the ass of Dana White, like Dana White's going to be the savior for boxing. Oh, Dana White needs to get involved in boxing. Shut the hell up, dude. You don't know what it's the promoters. Shut up, dude. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. Just keep the sport of boxing out of your mouth. And the worst part about it is, I said earlier, is that mainstream fans who don't know the difference are going to believe every single thing that he says and regurgitate it. That's the worst part about it.
All right, we got someone else joining here. Keep it 100 bucks. What's happening, yo? What's happening?
How you doing, brother?
Hey, you had yourself on mute there.
No, my bad. I'm just listening to y'all cook, man. That's all. I'm listening to y'all, man.
Yeah, this is up, man. This is up. Good for you to join us, man. You cook.
Hey, James, can you put on this Doughboy comment where it says Golden Boy wants Virgil Ortiz to fight Spence? Can you pull that up, please? Okay, so once again, this is one of the problems of one of the many issues concerning the business of boxing. How are they going to make that fight? How are they going to make that fight? Golden Boy would love that opportunity because that's a huge fight. But how are they going to make that fight? This is the problem that you're seeing in the breakdown of Gervonta Davis and Ryan Garcia. It's the problem you saw on the breakdown of Jamal Charlo versus Jaime Munguia. That's what I'm saying. These, you know what? In a perfect world, and if these guys ever get their heads out of their asses, and if DAZN actually had a clue, if they had someone actually steering the ship, they'd say, you know what? We obviously have the deep pockets. We're spending tens of millions of dollars on this boxing entertainment, and we're still not really moving the needle. We still have less than 1 million subscribers in the American market. What we should do is be working with all of these other promoters and say, hey, guys, we're going to be working with all of you, and we're going to be paying you a lot more than ESPN or Showtime or anyone else, and we will stage the big fights, the Super Bowls of boxing, as you will, on our DAZN platform. No more exclusive agreements with any one promoter. We're going to be working with everyone.
Everybody.
But listen, I always said this one before, y'all, about the zone. I always thought what they should have did instead of coming up with the takeover, right? You get your big star like your Triple G, your Canelo, right? But what they should have did, they should have got like you were saying earlier, with the grassroots promoters and get every young talent out there that ain't signed to a major promoter, should have been over there with them, Eddie Hearn and them. That's what they should have did.
Well, look, and once again, they wanted to make a splash early and immediately.
Because
and so what they tried to do
like
was
a sports
sign the
team.
biggest stars, and that
You
was
build
their
the big stars,
inexperience.
you got this prospects on the bottom too. They
Yeah,
don't have no prospects.
Jamil. But once again, who are your matchmakers?
Well, let's keep
Who are going to be your promoters? Look. Here's the problem, right? And so, like, well, Chingao, man, like Jamil, like he knows, like when you sign fighters, and Ross Greenberg, Ken Hirschman, they all found this out the hard way, and you know, Lou DiBella knew this. You know, your ideology should be to sign matchups, not fighters.
Yep.
Sign matchups, not fighters. It never ends well, because when you sign a fighter to a long, lucrative, like 10-fight deal, okay, he wants to fight not necessarily the best fighters available. He just wants to fight, and when you it becomes a real problem then. Just like with Canelo, they weren't happy paying him $35 million fighting guys who really didn't move the needle. And that's when the whole breakdown came. That's when he left Golden Boy. That's when he sued both of them.
Yo, with all
matchups.
Hey, Joe, with all the criticism that PBC gets on the daily.
Oh, my gosh, it makes me sick.
5 to 10 posts by these, like, sycophants daily, right?
It makes me sick.
Mind you, Jaime Munguia is skating by. Jaime Munguia has 40 fucking fights.
Yeah, I talked about that earlier also. I have no problem with Munguia and Golden Boy kind of dragging their feet and babying this kid. And once again, it's just business 101, right? And John Chargan taught me, okay, the first rule of promotions 101, you protect your ticket sellers. And once again, this is a kid who doesn't have a deep amateur background. I'm not thrilled about his next fight, but at least they're trying to keep him active and trying to keep him on camera. And he is one of their biggest ticket sellers right now.
This is the issue. This is the issue that I have, right? You lie to the public consistently. I know that comes with promoting, but being that I'm a customer, I don't appreciate being lied to. Don't tell me that it was Showtime's fault with the Charlo thing. You don't want to put Jaime in any kind of danger. You don't.
Oh my gosh, that pissed me off as well, Jamil.
It's time for Jaime and Oscar to get criticism, because while you protect your ticket sellers, you're not even putting him in there with B-level competition. Currently, you're not even putting him in there with past prime competition.
Right.
Currently, you're putting him in there with never was.
Yep. So here's the dilemma, and I explained this because I spoken with Roberto Diaz off the record, right? And I'm never going to print this, but I'll say it on James's channel. And once again, they don't feel comfortable pushing him up against the Goliaths of any division at this time, because they don't like the progression that he's doing with Eric Morales. Don't be surprised if they try to get him involved with another trainer, right? Because he still doesn't fight behind an intelligent jab. Okay, he still doesn't use any feints. I mean, look how often he was countered by a shot fighter like Gabe Rosado in his last fight.
Yeah.
Look how often he was countered by Gabe Rosado. Okay, once again, it's very simple. Just teach this boy how to fight behind an intelligent jab. incorporating feints, touch jabs, hard sticking jabs to the body, chest, and head. And as soon as he works his way inside, then let him go to town. He's a brilliant inside fighter, but he is terribly irresponsible defensively. And Golden Boy knows this. Roberto Diaz, Eric Gomez, they know this. So do you really think they're going to put him up against Janibek Ali Manala or
No,
Demetrius Andrade?
I'm just
No,
ready
hell
for
no.
criticism. You have to start I feel like there's a lot of picking and choosing in boxing. Certain dudes.
Well, here's the problem, Jamil. Here's the problem, because, and you know as well as I do, there are a lot of people in this industry, a lot of smart people that I respect, that for some strange reason have a real hard-on for Al Haymon. A lot of guys that I respect, and so it's almost like it's become a tired old narrative that these YouTube shills just regurgitate. And I'm not going to name any names, but how many times you've already heard since Ryan Garcia's, desperate tweet last night?
Yeah.
Al Haymon screws up another fight. Oh, Steven Espinoza ruins another matchup, ruins another deal. How many times have you heard that today?
It's a lazy narrative from people that don't have any inside sources.
It's an ignorant one. And once again, for somewhere along the way, these guys have fallen into the trap thinking that it's a more enlightened way of being, to tear down everything about boxing. For some reason, they think that it's a more intelligent way of thinking. But you know what? I'm here to tell you quite the contrary. Okay? It means that you don't know what the hell you're talking about.
It's counterproductive.
Well, it means you don't know really what's going on. Oh, blame it on Haymon. You might as well blame it on the damn tooth fairy.
But a lot of times they get their news from biased people. They get their information from biased people.
That's the problem, dude.
Right?
Let's
look at Rick, right? I've talked to Rick before on the phone. Now, Rick has issues with Al Haymon because of business that they've had together. So Rick is never going to speak glowingly of Al. He's never going to
talking about Rick Glazer, right?
Yes, we were talking about Rick.
Okay. Rick is a very dear friend of mine, but everything that he says about Al Haymon, I just take it with a grain of salt. He's got,
you gotta take it with a grain of salt.
This goes back 20 years. Apparently, he had a bad deal with Al Haymon. He believes he's right about it. Al, he doesn't agree with what Al did. And since then, he's had a hard-on for Al Haymon for the past 20 years. And and so once again, these people who don't know any better are just running with this narrative, thinking that Rick Glazer actually knows, because he's an insider in this business. And once again, I get along really well with Rick. I really like Rick. He's a really good guy, and he makes me laugh. But when it comes to certain people in this industry, he can no longer remain objective.
Right. Yeah, there's usually a point where it's like some people are not objective, but they kind of like view things as how they want to view them. It's some level of bias that goes behind that. And yeah, we did get that from Rick Glazer over the years. I've had him as a guest on the show, like a couple of years ago and stuff like that, where he talks about different things. But when it comes to Al Haymon, it's like,
You can't be objective any longer, James.
Right. Yep.
And with Stephen A. mentioning, we got to get Dana White.
Oh, jeez.
So wait, Dana White makes fights with Bellator? Dana White makes fights with
what we talked about earlier. And these idiots don't even know the difference.
They be acting like UFC is a fucking sport. It's a promotion. Dipshit.
And they don't know the difference. They're fucking, or pardon my French, they're effing idiots, brother.
No. Go ahead. Because you know what? I'm going to find a way to get that clip from Stephen A. Smith. And depending on how long that is, I'm going to share that on Twitter, on my personal account, and I'm going to personally call him out on that bullshit.
He's an idiot. And you know what? He needs to keep the sport of boxing out of his mouth. He knows nothing of it. Okay? He knows it. Oh, it's the promoters. Shut the hell up, dude. You have no idea what the hell you're talking about. You have no idea what you're talking about.
He getting fed that, though,
and,
bro.
hold on. Pull up a comment.
He getting fed that.
Pull Pull up a comment here from Juice Boxing Source if you can. Thank you, James. It says protecting your ticket seller is pathetic and sucks as a fan. It depends. It depends on what you're talking about. If you're a neutral fan and really don't have a dog in the hunt, yeah, it sure does. Guys who just want to see the best fight the best. But if you're a fan of Jaime Munguia, which he has a lot of them, and they're growing with each fight, then no, you have no problem seeing it. And look, honestly, and those are the ones who are currently paying the bills. And I hate to say this, guys, but this is a huge problem within the business of boxing. Okay, the diehard fans, I'd probably say about 90% of them no longer financially support their favorite pastime.
No.
That's become a real problem. So with that said, and once again, statistics and numbers don't lie. So with that said, do you really think, Juice, with all due respect, that Golden Boy or DAZN is currently listening to anything that you have to say?
Listen, as long as they make money, right? As long as they make money, and it's kind of like goes for fighters too when it comes to these contracts or these things that they're offered. As long as they make money, as long as they make a profit, and it doesn't really matter who their league guy fights, they really don't care about those matchups. All they care about is the money and the profit. So they're going to continue to make those fights where they end up turning a big profit and do that as long as they possibly can. Until, like I said earlier, until it's time where they say, hey, if we put him up against somebody that, is too much of a match for him, but if we get enough money and that we get a good amount of money for making that fight happen, then yeah, we're going to take it. Or they feel like he is good enough to face those guys and they feel like he can win. And this goes all across the board with promotional companies.
That's right. Now I'm going to explain this. So James, can you put up his most recent comment? And once again, Juice, the only reason and once again, I have a ton of respect for Juice. He's a great fan and a very knowledgeable one, and I'm not singling you out. I just think this is very important to discuss at this time. All right. It says true, which is why boxing piracy is at an all-time high. Okay, this is a problem though. Right? This is a problem because even if you do put the best matchups together, okay, diehard fans are still not purchasing it. Okay, and Tim Smith, everyone in the business already knows this. They already know this, which is why they're trying to build their best ticket sellers into bigger mainstream commodities.
Oh,
okay. They're not worried about you. Okay. Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jamil. Go ahead, sir.
Hey, make your last point because I wanted to get on my soapbox real fast.
Okay. So here it is. And I'll try to make this as quick as possible. Most diehards, and here's the reason why, and it's hard to fault them. And once again, I feel your pain, brother, because we've been the only American sports fans in existence expected to pay. For decades, we've been paying for every substantial matchup, significant matchup for the past 30, 40 years. And so now we finally have an outlet and a way to see these great fights without having to pay for them in HD. Do you really think that fans, even if they get Spence Crawford, are not going to stream it? Listen, you know what? They finally gave us the best matchup that we can see. I'm going to reward the promoters and the networks, and I'm going to actually spend my hard-earned money on this event. Most diehard fans are not thinking that way, Juice. That's the problem, brother.
Hey, Jay, can I cook real fast?
Go ahead, real quick.
Go ahead, brother. Go ahead.
Hey, Juice, right? And this is for anybody watching. The biggest problem with boxing, and people are going to get mad at me for saying this, isn't the promoters, isn't the networks. It's boxing fans.
That's it.
Let me tell you why, right? UFC. You know why everybody says the UFC fights the best? Well, first off, the UFC is only a promotion. So they don't fight the other great MMA fighters in other promotions. But what they do is they have fans that don't care about if a fighter loses. They don't care about the O. Yep. See, now you have guys right? You have guys that are going to tell you Deontay Wilder's washed up, that Keith Thurman is washed up because they saw him lose once. So what happens is promoters, fighters in any business, you respond to the customer's wants and needs. So if the customer wants O's, I'm going to put my guy in favorable matchups that he keeps his O, because I know that fans will stop supporting him if he loses his O, as opposed to you wanting to see the best matchup and realizing that somebody has to lose, and that doesn't mean they're a hype job for losing. Keith Thurman is a unified champion that lost to arguably the greatest little man fighter of all time. I'm saying arguably. Yep. Some people consider him that, some people don't. But he lost to him by split decision, and all you hear is rhetoric that says Keith Thurman's a bum. Keith Thurman, once upon a time, he's washed up. I don't want to see Keith Thurman. But you expect them to go out and fight killer after killer after killer when they know how you operate? I'm not saying you, Juice. I'm saying in general. That's the boxing fan, and that's why you don't get the matchups that you want. Because of piracy, because of how fans react after a fighter loses. Y'all can go ahead.
All right.
No, very well said, Jamil. Couldn't have said it any better myself, brother. But that's it. But he hit the nail right on the head. Look, I was doing PR work for a fighter that's going to remain unnamed, right? Hot prospect, good guy. We took him to a network that's going to remain unnamed, right? And he was 16-2. Okay, with 15 knockouts. And you know what they told us? Well, he's got 2 losses. What's wrong with him? So it's not just the fans. It's the networks also. They need someone. They need someone again. These networks need someone again, like Lou DiBella, Ken Hirschman, Ross Greenberg, guys who actually know the business, rather than just taking these promoters' words for it.
And that's crazy. That's crazy.
Hey, Joe, but I can say the network is responding to the customer.
Yeah.
You make a good point, but the network is responding to the customer.
You know what, brother? That is a great point. That is they're just reactionary. That is a great point, brother.
Yeah, they are. They are. You know, I was gonna bring up this whole thing in reference to, you know, like with the fans, and you talk about piracy, and that was one thing that Tim Smith, yes, he did emphasize that point. With piracy being at an all-time high, when it's so easy, just being straight up, when it's so easy for someone to access, you know, Floyd Mayweather versus Manny Pacquiao, Floyd Mayweather versus Conor McGregor, or Deontay Wilder versus Tyson Fury 1, you know. If they see that it's so easy for them to access these pay-per-view level fights on something that they don't have to pay for it, then that is what they're going to do. As you said, Joseph, a lot of the fans are lazy. They're not going to really support these fighters on any level there is, whether it's watching it on TV, whether it's buying a ticket, whether it's you know, supporting their merchandise and that type of stuff.
James, let me tell you, brother, diehard fans are the absolute worst, my friend. Yeah. Okay, dude, you will like very few diehard fans have ever been to a gym, have ever been to a live club show. They've never been like, hey man, let me get a camera. Let me be a part of the local media. Let me support this and try and promote and blow up this event. They could easily do that. And local promoters would be more than happy to credential them, give them a ringside seat, okay, for their effort.
No, I'm sorry. I was looking at Juice's comment.
Oh yeah, you did kill it, brother. But very few of them. And like, guys, if you want to get involved and you want to really do your part, go support local club shows, regional club shows. Okay, get to know these young, hardworking fighters. Get to know these experienced carving knives of the sport, guys who help mold our best prospects.
Yes. The most important part of the business, the opponent.
Unsung heroes of boxing. That's right.
Yeah.
Get to know these guys.
Like here's the other things with fans, right? You know, they had that whole, well, I'm not gonna say the B word, but you have the quote unquote journeyman in boxing. Like, why don't you cover the so-called journeyman in boxing? The guy that, you know, they get in there, they set up a fight with them. He does what he does. He's there to, you know, either, you know, get the win or get the check or whatever it is, but he's still doing it because that's what he wants to do. Like, why not follow someone like that? Because that's part of the business that, you know, a lot of the fans don't really focus on, you know, when it kind of like goes into the what I would say, I wouldn't necessarily say the dark side of sorts, but it kind of like goes into the downside or whatever it is, you know, when it comes to boxing, is that, hey, you could follow the guys that are 18-0, 30-0, 45-0 all you want to, but what about the guys that are like 15-6, you know, 25-18, you know, like, you know, what about those guys? They're still out there, you know, making a living, you know, fighting there as a professional boxer. So
yeah, guys who didn't get signed right away to a big time promoter like Top Rank or Al Heyman or Golden Boy, and they were forced to be stuck in tough early on in their career, and they picked up 2 or 3 losses along the way.
Yo, let's play a game real fast, right?
Yep.
Let's hear it.
Name your top 5 journeymen.
Oh gosh. There's so many to mention. I tell you what, though, one of my favorites of all time, and I'm going to pull up his box rec so I can tell you more intelligently. This guy, it was out of Texas. Obviously, that's where I'm from, right? And he, oh jeez, he actually is from Mexico, and he was a tough, rugged badass who was always capable of pulling off the occasional upset, but he still held down an 8-to-5 job during the day, and he still went to the gym after work every single day. He ended his career at 56, 32-3, and his name is Hector Velasquez from Mexico.
Okay.
This was a guy who every major promoter used as a quote-unquote opponent because they knew he could take a good shot and give you some hard rounds. And boy, he was going to test you. He was going to press you, and you were going to learn something after fighting this guy. So in my opinion, just one that pops up to mind, and there's so many of these guys around the sport. And so I'm going to say Hector Velasquez, 56, 32-3 from Mexico.
Real fast, Joe. I'm going to piggyback off of that and say this. You got promoters and managers that if they invested a certain amount of money in the prospect and they want to see if they want to keep investing, they will put them in there with a, we'll call them truth serum or the confessional.
The carving knives, brother. The guy's going to give you a baptismal by fire.
Yeah,
yep.
You're going to see what kind of guy that you've been putting thousands of dollars in, because a lot of fans don't understand how much it costs to move a prospect. They think that, you know, in the early parts of your career, you're the A side and you get paid a purse. Oh no. Your manager and promoter is paying to move you. They're paying for your opponent.
You know what? I'll give you a story about Hector Velasquez, brother, the guy that I was talking about, right? Carlos Quintana. Well, he was better than just he had real superstar world champion potential, Carlos Quintana. That guy, that's not who we're talking about. I'll tell you a story, though. And I was covering a fight, and it was on the undercard of Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. and Peter Manfredo in Houston, right? It's on HBO. And on the undercard was a guy who was a former kind of quasi-Olympian. He didn't get to compete in the Olympics, but he made the Olympic team out of Cleveland, Mickey Bay Jr., right? Mm-hmm. And so Bob Arum and Bruce Trampler, Brad Goodman, they said, okay, we want to see what he has. We're going to stick him in the ring with Hector Velasquez, right? And he was outboxing him beautifully in the first round. And in the second round, here comes Hector Velasquez with an overhand right, clips him, man, on the temple. He goes down in round 2. Right? He ends up getting up, finishing the fight, winning a decision. But I talked to Mickey after the fight, and he goes, you know, to be honest with you, I don't even remember finishing the fight.
Man, wow. That
told well, Brad Goodman and Bruce Trampler exactly what kind of fighter Mickey Bay was.
Man, that reminds me of that fight with Brandon Lee against Will Madera, where Brandon Lee got clipped in round 3, and I thought for certain he was out, and he still ended up winning that decision. Man, I was like, damn.
So you know what's funny when you look at Mickey Bay's career and you look at how how close he came to winning a championship, right? When you look at his fight, and I remember seeing it broke my heart, man, because I love Mickey. Such a great guy. But when you look at his fight with John Molina Jr., right? You remember that fight at the Hard Rock?
Yeah.
It was on Showtime.
Yeah, I remember that.
Okay, so here he is winning the fight, easily outboxing John Molina Jr., showing his craft, and all of a sudden, he gets caught in the 10th, and he gets knocked out. I wasn't surprised when I saw it because once again, we'd seen what happens when he gets that pressure and he elects to fight someone on the inside.
Yeah.
And to Jamil's point, yeah, you know what you have when you test him against these hard badasses, man, that are the unsung heroes of boxing.
Real fast. My day ones, right? Luis Collazo, Robert Guerrero. Nah, they not.
Oh,
yeah.
No,
they're
those
not,
guys are champions, man.
Those
guys are
are
legitimate champions.
No. We're talking about.
We're talking about guys.
Darnell Boone.
Darnell Boone, baby. Woo! Dude, that's a great example, man. That guy was
my number one.
If you weren't careful, boy, he was going to stop you in your tracks with that quick, short, compact left hook, man. Ooh, Darnell Boone's a great one. Just ask my brother Emmanuel Stewart and Adonis Stevenson.
Yo,
Andre Ward, Anthony Thompson, Juan Simon, John Pascal, Brian Barrett, Curtis Stevens, Erislandy Lara, Adonis Stevenson, Sergey Kovalev, Willie Monroe Jr., Sergey Kovalev again, Adonis Stevenson.
Look at that resume, man.
Hey, Jay, what you got to add to that is at one time he had either knocked down or knocked out the top 3 light heavyweights in boxing. Andre Ward, Sergey Kovalev, and Adonis Stevenson.
Yep. Now that is one of the true carving knives of the sport. That guy was a badass. And boy, you better not. Okay, another one that comes to mind is the Dingaling Man. You remember him?
Oh.
Heavyweight?
Yeah, heavyweight, man. Oh, man, what was his name, man? Oh, shit. Should know this.
Hold on, dude. I'm going to look him up real quick.
That was the funniest nickname.
Hey, Jay, give me one. Who's your journeyman?
Darnell Wilson, Dingaling Man, brother.
Yeah,
that guy was a hell of a gatekeeper, man.
He was one. Boone was my guy. That was the guy I was going to bring up, was Darnell Boone. Currently, you know, it could be who could it be currently? I would say Gabe Rosado. But
Gabe Rosado was a legitimate contender. Dude, check it out though, JR. Check it out though, JR. Like, do you remember the Dingaling Man, Darnell Wilson? Like when David El Nino Rodriguez, undefeated prospect, right, got signed by Main Events from El Paso, Texas. He was 36-0 with 34 knockouts.
Ooh,
they stick him in the ring. Yeah, they stick him in the ring with Darnell Wilson, the Dingaling Man. Okay, he's winning the fight, looking great, and then all of a sudden gets caught and flattened in the final round.
Yep.
That was Ding, man. And you know what a great guy he is. And he ended his career with 25-21 with 3 draws. He was 25-21-3 with 21 knockouts he could crack. Yeah. And you knew you were going to get tested, man.
Out of them 21 losses, probably like 17 or 18 were high-level prospects.
Oh, Boy, they and you know what? And they were controversial at times. Let me tell you, man, he got also. Do you remember he pulled off the upset in Germany when they tested Juan Carlos Gomez?
Gomez, yeah,
You remember that?
49-2.
Yep, Dingaling man actually beat him in Germany. Yep, that's how tough. And boy, you had to show up. You had to show up. You remember him giving BJ Flores everything he could handle when he was coming up?
Yeah.
Emmanuel Augustus.
Hank Lundy.
Oh gosh, Emmanuel Augustus was the ultimate carving knife, brother.
You
Boy,
said you said Hank Jr. I don't know because Hank challenged for a world title.
Yeah, see, Hank was a legitimate contender at one point in time.
Yeah.
But dude, Emmanuel Augustus, boy, that guy could fight. Yeah, he was from Brownsville, Texas, man, for a while. Emmanuel, you know what's funny, man? That guy would put on a show, man. He was a guy who, boy, you had better bring it, or else he was going to embarrass you in the ring with that disjunct, drunken fist style.
Yep.
Well, that guy was a bad dude, man. Oof.
Yeah, that was definitely the measuring stick. Back in the day was Emmanuel Augustus for sure.
Oh, Emmanuel Augustus, dude, that guy. He was a joy to watch.
Yeah. Kirtland was a champ, pretty much like a champion, world champion level. So I can't, put him as that, guy that's a journeyman or something like that.
Oh, dude, his fight with Mickey Ward was legendary on Friday Night Fights.
Yeah, Ward.
Dude, and he ended his career as good as he was. He ended his career as at 38 wins, 34 losses, and 6 draws.
Yeah. You got my guy that's out there now. I wonder if is he going to be part of this fight? I got to see if he's still going to be part of this fight card. The thing there. So I'll look up someone else here. K9 Bundridge, Cornelius Bundridge, you had out there, of course. So
you could actually state though most of the guys off that contender show. Brian Vetta was a really look at the job he did with Andy Lee on Friday Night Fights. You remember that?
Yeah.
Hey,
man.
I'm gonna say this, right? As far as like guilty pleasures as a boxing fan, while he wasn't the most skilled guy, I love Andy Lee. Oh,
yeah.
I love Andy, man. Oh my god,
that right hook could kill a rhino, yo.
Oh my
he
god,
could get his ass kicked the whole fight, and then all of a sudden here he goes.
And I know which fight you're referring to, brother.
I'm referring to a couple of them. I'm referring to
that was Jackson Jr., brother.
Yeah,
that was Jackson Jr., man.
Yeah.
And Matvey Korobov.
Yeah, Matt.
Oh my gosh, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Dude.
Peter Quillen.
You know what's funny?
Yeah.
When I used to work with Emmanuel Stewart, he used to say that man, he goes, he picked him out of the amateurs, out of the Olympics, Emmanuel, and he said, this is gonna be my Irish Tommy Hearns, is what he thought.
But Jamil, we had this discussion a while back in reference to kind of separating or categorizing fighters. Like you would have the champions, you would have the contenders, you would have the gatekeepers, and you would have the journeymen. And the thing is like between the gatekeepers and the journeymen, there's a number of fans that can't really decipher what is what between those two. So, we had these, guys on the list there with Quintana and Collazo, Guerrero, Uma. You got to be able to, figure out, okay, what is a contender, what is a gatekeeper, and what is a journeyman, And we had this thing where, we talked about Sean Porter, right? And that Sean Porter was a contender. Sean Porter was, somebody that was a 2-time welterweight champion of the world. And he had his fight there with Terrence Crawford, and he has that loss. And it's like, well, he doesn't necessarily want to be a gatekeeper, so why not retire, basically? So that was the thing about it, is that, you could have those fights against journeyman. Journeyman would be somebody that you would put you imagine somebody that's like a up and coming fighter that's could be 6-7-0 or 10-11-0 that you say, okay, where's he at this particular point? Is he really the goods? Let's put him up against a journeyman or something like that. A gatekeeper is somebody that's like say, hey, we see him as a potential contender, but we're not gonna put him up there yet. Let's see if he could fight someone that's like a gatekeeper that either had contended for a world title or was a world champion, but hadn't been a world champion in a while. So he's basically there as someone that that was good at some point, but isn't good enough to be a contender at the top level. So you have those different levels of fighters in every division. It's just that you got to be able to distinguish what's a contender, what's a gatekeeper, what's a journeyman, and what could be there outside of that. You know what I mean? So that's how you distinguish them.
Well, you know what's difficult though, and it's very unfair, and like Jamil just what he eloquently pointed out was that it's a very hard thing to deal with when you get a guy who's learning on the job, right? He gets some hard losses on his resume, like within his first 10 fights, and then all of a sudden he's just kind of labeled as a sparring partner or a journeyman, right? And it's very unfair. And the only guy of recent memory that I can remember to become a world champion after really learning on the job and getting a ton of losses on his resume early is Orlando Salido.
Yep.
That's a guy who really, it took him a minute, but it finally clicked. Do you remember his fight with Manwa or what's his name? Juanma Lopez? Yep. That was a guy who was just supposed to be just a stay busy fight on the road to putting together Juanma Lopez versus Yuriorkis Gamboa. And boy, Orlando Salido had something. Well, he had a different agenda, right?
Mm-hmm.
See, but
and he wasn't taken really seriously by Showtime or the promoter or Top Rank, because he was supposed to be just a stay busy fight, a guy who's going to keep your iron sharp, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're putting together this super fight with Yuriorkis Gamboa. And boy, Orlando Salido just gave him the business and really put his lights out. I mean, you can say that after those two fights with Orlando Salido, he was never the same. And Juan Mott one time he was a budding superstar. He was going to be a superstar. And it really, really turned his career on its head. Yeah.
Yo, the thing with that, right, is it goes back to what I was saying about fans. Fans look at a matchup and automatically judge it based off of the fighter's record, even though they've never seen him fight. Now, I've never seen a guy that Jaime Munguia is fighting. My only criticism is that Jaime Munguia has over 40 fights, and that Jaime Munguia has been a world champion before, and we've seen too many of these fights in a row. I don't have a problem with you sprinkling this guy in after a tough fight, but I've seen like 3 or 4 guys of this ilk.
Oh, okay.
Back to back.
I get the fact about being active and things like that. But in reference to Jaime Munguia, like, okay, you fight, guys that have been like former world title contenders or whatever it is. You're there at the middleweight division. You fight a Spike O'Sullivan, you fight a Toriano Johnson, you fight a Nilson Cerameta. Those guys have either been mandatories at one point or probably fought for world titles. Or you fight like someone like Gabe Rosado. Okay, you have that. You fight Demetrius Ballard, who was up, coming up. He was undefeated, so he was pretty much like going to be on the verge of being a contender of sorts. They're in the middleweight division, but then you turn around and you fight Jimmy Kelly, and now it's Gonzalo Correa, and it's like, you're moving up, you're moving up, you're moving up, and then you kind of like go back down a little bit. Maybe it is because of, I guess, a lack of progression as a fighter.
That's it. That's exactly what it is.
But like when you fight someone that's a former world title contender, the former IBF mandatory challenger, actually there was about 2 of them there with Johnson, Toriano Johnson, and Camille Cesare-Meta, and you fight, a former 154.
Dude, that was a great fight, by the way, brother.
So I'm like, it's just it's just you're stopping their progression, basically. So I don't understand it. It's kind of like opposite of like Zerto. Zerto's on the verge of fighting for the light heavyweight title, WBA light heavyweight, against Dimitri Bivol. He is a former world champion at super middleweight, moved up to light heavyweight. Had a little situation, with that, when he entered the light heavyweight, division, but he was still, able to work himself to get himself fights that are pretty much at a, high level of sorts at light heavyweight before facing Dimitri Bivol. So, at least with Gilberto Zurdo Ramirez, he has been able to, kind of like have those fights against, world title contenders, and then eventually, have this bout here for the world title in the light heavyweight division against Dimitri Bivol. So, I mean, I'm liking that. Like you're facing, you're fighting a Tony Carpenter, Sullivan Barrera, Yeski Gonzalez. Those are guys that you kind of like say are tough fighters. They're in a sense in the light heavyweight division. They kind of like be that measuring stick of, okay, can he really do something in the light heavyweight division? Okay, he's getting these KO victories. Cool. Let's put him up there against Dimitri Bivol, see what he's going to do.
I don't like to judge fights based off of guys' records. I was just pointing out that too many of those in a row, it's a bad look, because fights are won in the ring. Fights are won stylistically. I've seen plenty of guys that had horrible records, and then when I see them fight, I'm like, damn, I got a name for y'all. Cameron Crail.
How about Tony the Tiger Lopez, brother? He was brought up as a club fighter and ended up becoming world champion. And once again, he was brought up the right way by Don Chargan. And this guy had losses on his resume before he got his title opportunity, but he picked it up from the club level, and he was hard as nails.
Somebody mentioned Tevin Farmer. That's a good one too.
Oh, Tevin Farmer's a very, very good example as well. A guy who was, was learning on the job. That's the problem with, and once again, it goes back to the fan perception problem as well as the network perception problem, right? A guy like Jaime Munguia, Golden Boy, is really leery about feeding him his first loss. This is why they're dragging their feet and taking their time with this kid, because 1, he's only 26, and 2, even though he's got 40 fights, he's and a former world champion, he's still admittedly learning on the job. That's it. And because he can sell tickets, they're taking their time with this kid. And diehard fans may not like it, but it is what it is. And at least they're keeping him active. And that's always increasing his ticket sales. I mean, if you look at every event, his attendance, his live attendance, his ticket sales keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And man, I tell you what, he's such an exciting fighter to watch. Like, you go and look at that fight, and you brought it up, Toriano Johnson. Holy shit, that was an amazing fight, dude.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was up to that point.
Oh, it was grotesque. But that was a great fight, man. Yeah. And you know what? Toriano Johnson, man, he's a tough guy. He's a tough, skilled guy.
Yeah.
And even the fight with Gary Spike O'Sullivan was really entertaining. In which I saw some improvement. Unfortunately, though, that improvement isn't progressing as quickly as Golden Boy had hoped.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the problem, man. That's a big problem. So I know what Jamil's saying. You know what? When are you going to actually pull the trigger and let this guy off the leash?
Yeah, we got to see. I really don't know. It's kind of like what you said. You might not see it until late 2023 or 2024.
That's my guess, dude. And in my opinion, They need to get him involved with a different trainer. And I love Eric Morales, and I think he's a great guy. But in my opinion, they need to stick Jaime Munguia in with the Reynosos, right? With Canelo's trainer. In my opinion.
Yeah.
Yep. Teach him some damn defense, man. Teach him how to fight behind an intelligent jab. I mean, come on, man. Dude, come on. I know you're 26, 40 professional fights. Learn how to work behind a more intelligent jab. Apply more intelligent pressure. Because I tell you what, once he closes the distance, boy, he's a force. He's got a great chin, heavy hands, and boy, he throws combinations extremely well to the body and head once he's in the pocket. But it's getting there that's the problem. That's what Golden Boy sees. And once again, I know this because I've spoken with Roberto Diaz and Eric Gomez about it.
Yeah, they gotta figure out like how to have him be developed at this particular point to where he can become a more complete fighter, so that they could have, with confidence, they could have him matched up against those guys that are at the top of the middleweight division at this point. So I mean, we'll eventually see how that goes, man. But
because it's a very good, like when you're a promoter, you have to understand and you have a fighter who has potential star quality, like Jaime Munguia, fan-friendly style. Mexican fans love him, right? You have to be very careful because Eddie Futch once said, if you fight like a guy like, well, say Jaime Munguia in that style, you're going to have a short but glorious career. So you have to be very careful when bringing him along. And there is no right or wrong answer at this point. This is why I'm saying, guys, judge slowly. Just be appreciative that we're seeing him active, seeing him back in the ring. Judge slowly.
Yep. Now, I want to give a quick shout out to Lefty there with Fort Bend Media. He did forward me the segment, I guess, that was on First Take in reference to Mr. Stephen A. Smith.
Oh, geez.
That means I will publicly call out Stephen A. Smith on Twitter and say how much bullshit he done espoused on that particular segment. Okay. So that will be coming here in the next few minutes or so. But in the meantime, we'll kind of like bring this conversation to a close. We did kind of like go in depth with that welterweight situation, and we did talk about various topics in the sport of boxing. I thank Brother Joseph Heron of Warwick Radio Network for joining in. Jabil of YSM Sports Media for joining in. Ty, Mr. Keeper 100 Boxing for joining in. We also, had a number of other people joining in this live conversation as well. Shout out to those that were on the live chat. Doughboy Juice, also G5 Jib TV was in the building. So we had like a good little conversation. Shout out to G Funky Boxing, my day ones also, and Aaron Whitehurst II for being part of the live chat. We will kind of like have another live podcast scheduled for Sunday. We will kind of like talk about all of the action that is taking place tomorrow. So we're going to be going through all of that. They're on the latest episode of the Boxing Source radio show. So hopefully you could join us live for that. But in the meantime, we will be getting back at you in the weekend. And once again, thank everyone for joining this live conversation, and I will catch y'all later. Peace out.
Take care, James.
Yep.